Thomas Hardy was certain the Carter family didn't belong among the elite of his building. But when he launched his campaign to evict them, he had no idea that the Carters were the actual owners of the property. Nathaniel's response would shock even the most jaded. The Carter family moves into their new home, a luxurious, historic, and prestigious building in the city center. Nathaniel Carter, a successful businessman, along with his wife Anne and their 2 children, has finally found a place that aligns with their ambitions. Nathaniel feels a bit uneasy, not about the apartment itself, but because they are expected here not as owners, but as regular tenants, which adds an intriguing twist to their move. As they arrive, the family doesn't notice that they're being closely watched by the building manager, Thomas Hardy. Thomas, a white man in his 60s with extensive property management experience and a keen sense of who belongs in such a place, sees Carter and his family for the first time, and it's clear he's not impressed. His eyes narrow, and his gaze grows hard as he watches them step out of their black SUV. Under the guise of inspections, Thomas keeps an eye on them, watching for any sign of non-compliance. He approaches Nathaniel as he unloads boxes. "Hello, you might have the wrong address," he says flatly, his tone revealing a hint of disdain. Nathaniel responds calmly, "No, this is our new home, thank you. We've already confirmed everything." Thomas, seemingly unfazed, continues to examine their car and boxes, as if expecting to spot something to confirm his suspicions. His fingers drum nervously on his phone as he decides to feign friendliness. "You know, this is a very prestigious place, quite particular. People here are used to certain standards. I just want to make sure that—" He pauses, giving Nathaniel a challenging look. "Everything will be fine." Nathaniel replies in a steady tone with a faint smile. "Yes, we understand this is a special place. Don't worry. My family and I will adhere to all the rules." Thomas's eyes flash with irritation, but he holds back, mumbling something about hoping for discretion as he walks away. The next day, Thomas checks in on the order of the floor. Strolling down the hallway, he pretends to jot down notes in a notepad. After a few minutes, he rings the Carter's doorbell. Nathaniel opens it, a mixture of surprise and weariness on his face. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," Thomas says. "I need to review the lease again. We have strict rules here, you understand." "Of course," Nathaniel answers smoothly. "I can send you a copy, as is customary in similar situations." Thomas frowns slightly, unaccustomed to such a confident tone. Masking his irritation with a forced smile, he adds, "I just want to be sure we're all on the same page. You know, there have been misunderstandings when people move into the wrong place." Nathaniel, catching the veiled hint, nods calmly, but a spark of defiance flashes in his eyes. "You needn't worry," he answers firmly. "We moved into this building completely legally, and as I see it, have every right to be here just like any other resident." Thomas nods, stepping back, but his hands clench into fists, and his expression turns cold. Over the next week, he finds more and more reasons to nitpick. The misplaced garbage container on the floor, noise complaints from neighbors. Nathaniel politely addresses each complaint, but Thomas becomes increasingly hostile with each encounter. At the end of the week, Thomas decides to take a firmer approach, waiting for Nathaniel at the entrance when he returns from work. "Look, Mr. Carter," he says, stopping Nathaniel at the doorstep. "I hope you realize that this place is meant for a certain circle of people. We don't tolerate disturbances here, and we all expect residents to meet certain standards." Nathaniel holds his gaze coldly and confidently. "Mr. Hardy," he says slowly, "my family lives here lawfully and always abides by the rules. So I suggest you choose your words more carefully." Thomas realizes he may have crossed a line. He mutters something about orderliness and leaves, casting a dissatisfied look back at Nathaniel. When Nathaniel closes the door, he realizes this is just the beginning. The next day, Nathaniel finds a notice on his door for an urgent inspection. The notice states that the manager requires access to the apartment to verify safety standards. Nathaniel and Anne decide to let him in, though they know this is just another pretext from Thomas. When Thomas arrives, his face is expressionless, but the tension is palpable. He inspects the apartment with a sneer, as if seeing something foreign. He goes through every room, finding fault in minor details, dust on a windowsill, suspicious marks on the floor, scribbling everything in his notebook with a frown. "You know," he remarks condescendingly, "there are very high standards here. Not everyone understands the level of upkeep required for a place like this." Anne finally has had enough. "It seems we've made it clear that we're aware of the rules, and this isn't your first warning," she retorts. Thomas doesn't hide his annoyance, his face twisting into a scowl. He throws them a look full of disdain. "Well, we'll see how long you can keep up these standards," he says with a sinister smile, leaving the apartment and leaving behind a tense atmosphere. In the following days, Thomas ramps up his attempts to push the Carters out. He circulates letters to residents, warning them about new tenants, hinting that their presence may cause certain inconveniences. He persuades some neighbors to be vigilant and report any suspicious activity. Nathaniel begins noticing that whenever he or his children step out of the apartment, some neighbors look at them warily, while others avert their eyes, as if pretending not to see them. The atmosphere around them grows tense, impacting the family's morale. The children start asking why no one greets them in the elevator, and Anne finds it harder and harder to hide her frustration. The situation reaches its peak at the end of the week when Thomas shows up with an official notice of possible eviction. "Your children are too noisy," he declares, holding a piece of paper. "The tenants are complaining, and I must take action. This isn't a place for loud families." "That's a lie, and you know it," Nathaniel replies sharply, barely containing his anger. "We've never broken the rules, and you know you have no grounds for eviction." Thomas smiles smugly, clearly savoring the moment. "Maybe there's no reason for now, but if you keep disturbing the peace, there will be," he says, his tone full of threat. Nathaniel realizes this man will go to any lengths to force them out, but he also knows that Thomas has no idea who he truly is. Deciding to let Thomas find out his mistake on his own, Nathaniel remains composed, watching just how far the manager is willing to go. Convinced it's time to escalate his actions, Thomas files a report with the police, claiming the Carter family is disturbing the peace and causing issues for the neighbors. Officers arrive at the apartment to investigate. When the police arrive, Nathaniel remains calm. He politely welcomes the officers, demonstrates full compliance with all rules, and calmly explains that the Carter family has not caused anyone any trouble. The officers leave, finding no grounds for the complaint. But soon after, at a building-wide meeting, Thomas publicly states that the Carters are allegedly the source of all inconveniences in the building. His words are filled with insinuations, leaving no doubt about his attitude toward them. "We all know this building upholds high standards, and I think you all understand that not everyone is fit to live here," he says, looking at Carter as if he has nothing to say in return. The room falls silent, but some residents exchange glances of disapproval. Unexpectedly, a young man named Mark speaks up. "I think this issue deserves closer examination. Thomas, maybe you're the one breaking some of the rules." Thomas flushes with anger, but replies sharply, "There's no room for discussion here. We uphold traditions. Anyone who disagrees is free to leave." The next day, Nathaniel takes decisive action. He contacts a lawyer to prepare for legal proceedings, but doesn't rush into public action. But then everything changes. One of the neighbors, disgusted by Thomas's open discrimination, records the incident at the meeting and posts it on social media. The video quickly gains traction, and comments pour in condemning Thomas's behavior. The media picks up the story, and soon it's not only being discussed in the city but beyond. People talk about how the building manager uses his authority to persecute tenants based on prejudice. Under public pressure, Thomas is called in for a hearing before the building's board of directors to discuss his conduct toward the Carters. At this meeting, Nathaniel finally reveals the truth. He produces documents proving that his family isn't renting, but owns the majority of the building through a family trust, of which Thomas was unaware. Calmly, he informs them that Thomas will be held accountable for his actions and announces he will initiate an investigation into Thomas's activities as manager. "Your position in this building is under review," Nathaniel states, meeting Thomas's gaze. "I am now formally requesting your dismissal." Thomas's face pales as he realizes he has made a catastrophic mistake, not only because of his prejudiced attitude, but also because he crossed the line by threatening the building's true owner. The story quickly spreads among the residents, and by the evening, most of them have rallied around Carter. Thomas, accustomed to his position and authority, finds himself at the center of a scandal with no allies. After the meeting, the board of directors immediately suspends Thomas and begins an internal investigation. The building's reputation is now threatened due to the scandal, and numerous complaints from residents about Thomas's aggressive behavior add more details to the case. Thomas attempts to salvage his position. He pleads with the board to reconsider his dismissal, pretending to regret his actions, but his apologies sound unconvincing. He realizes he's in a desperate situation and asks for a private conversation with Nathaniel. When Nathaniel meets him in an empty conference room, Thomas looks broken, his once haughty face now showing only confusion. "Listen, Mr. Carter," Thomas says with difficulty, trying to avoid his gaze. "I may have made a mistake. You have to understand, I was acting in the tenant's best interests. I was just maintaining order." Nathaniel listens attentively, without interrupting. "This wasn't a mistake, Thomas," he replies calmly but firmly. "This was a choice. You decided who deserves to live here based solely on what you saw on the outside without making any effort to understand us." Thomas tries to defend himself, but realizes it's pointless. His voice trembles, and he stammers. "Maybe I could change, if given a chance." Nathaniel is silent for a moment, then speaks. "All right, you'll get a chance, but not the one you're expecting. I'm willing to help you learn what it means to respect others. I will request the board not to fire you, but only if you agree to complete a cultural literacy course and participate in a social justice program." This is the final blow for Thomas. He doesn't expect this outcome, but knows it's his only chance to stay. The board agrees to Nathaniel's proposal, and Thomas has no choice but to accept the conditions. Over the following months, Thomas participates in programs that open his eyes to his own prejudices. He meets people he once avoided, hears their stories, and gradually begins to understand the harm he's caused. His old confidence and arrogance give way to humility and empathy. Meanwhile, Nathaniel and his family become an example of patience and resilience for the other residents. Neighbors slowly begin to apologize and interact, building a supportive community around the Carters. The final moment comes when Thomas publicly apologizes at the next residents' board meeting. "I realize I caused harm and acted unjustly," he says, looking at Nathaniel and his family. "I was wrong to think I knew who deserves to be here and who doesn't. I'm grateful for the chance to change." Nathaniel accepts his apology, and the room applauds. Thomas is now a changed man, and the building, once a symbol of exclusivity, becomes a beacon of change and justice. The story ends in a moral victory. Nathaniel and his family not only upheld their rights, but also transformed the person who sought to break them.